The entity is still stalking by helicopter right now, and I took screenshots, which you'll see those images. I'm going to document them right now. This is ongoing documentation. This is federal stalking that the entity that is flying over my apartment at 5 o'clock in the morning is engaging in. That same entity that is group stalking is also engaged in federal stalking. And so the sound of sirens occurring in the specific environment is the element of monitoring. Audible activity for purposes of criminal monitoring. It is engagement and you know that as a legal conclusion because you're looking at the impossible light activity while I am creating my Google Drive account, which I capture in still images. The entity is sounding sirens, and that's creating an obstruction to my ability to create a Google Drive. This is federal stalking that's on the venue of the internet, serving the criminal system. And it's also criminal obstruction of justice while that stalker and that sex offender then engages in criminal conduct to further stop you, preclude you from documenting the fact that they're stalking you and sexually violating you, keeping you under surveillance inside of the private space. So that simultaneity of audible activity, which is occurring as a matter of documentation. I'm going to upload it now so you can see what I'm referencing. The entity starts sounding sirens. That's speaking to stalking. The entity is in relevant position within earshot to sound sirens. But again, understand that that's amplification. You're dealing with the demonic. But this is an ongoing, while you are going to document a government that is indeed in practicing demonic activity, you will use that demonic environment to prosecute. The entity is amplifying helicopter activity while it is seen at a great distance, for example. You can see the helicopter and we can conclude reasonably together that it's impossible that one would be able to hear that helicopter from the distance. Nonetheless, that's exactly how you're identifying how a demon is targeting you. And that is speaking to the identification of targeting, the targeted individual, group stalking. This is serving a targeting system. And so the entity is sounding sirens inside of my apartment, which while you're looking at the presence of engineered light, which I captured on video and in still images, that is the evidence of targeting through audible activity. Anything that is heard in the presence of audible activity, including my voice, is serving to criminally monitor. While I'm creating my website, which I capture still images of, actually, let me show you that while I'm on video. This is what is popping up on my screen as I'm creating a Google account. You do not have to enter in a phone number for verifying in order to create a Google account. And in addition to that, the moment that I enter in a phone number, it's a means of obstructing. It's a superficial means to obstruct the ability to create it, because as soon as I enter it in, it says this phone number has been used too much. And that's also false because I've never used the phone number. It's used to block my ability to create it. So this is literally the stalkers that are necessarily group stalking in the path in order to hear their sirens. It's an admission while the entity engages in audible activity creation. In other words, you are stalking in the specific environment. They are group stalking using sirens. That's the entity that's acting directly as well. And this is what is the audible activity at the same time. This is captured at 5:41 a.m. At the same time while I'm creating my Google Drive at 5:41, the entity is amplifying sirens, which is the ongoing admission of the stalker that's creating audible activity, confirming their criminal presence in the path. And it is obstruction of justice while I am precluded from an ability to create my Google Drive, which again, entering in a phone number, verifying that you're not a so-called robot, is not actually required to create my Google Drive, as I capture on still images and in images, which I will show you here. I use a different device, which again, the entity is indeed monitoring, but this other device, my tablet, is one that I am not using, and it has, in other words, I'm not ever using it for purposes other than creating my Google account, and by virtue of its less frequent use, the entity is not capable of creating that obstacle. I want to be clear because here it goes. Here's the picture of it. I take a picture of my tablet. I create it at 5:46 a.m. There is no screen that's requiring you enter in a phone number. And that's not because it's on a tablet, because the entity does engage in what is monitoring like this on any and every device. Okay. It's not created on this. And based on what it is that I've observed, as the entity has been engaged in federal stalking for years, either clearing out everything, the communication device that the entity is monitoring on routinely. This is something that you're using every day on an ongoing, frequent basis. They're always monitoring on it, and that's because you're always using it. And there's a buildup of cookies, there's a buildup of history, there's a buildup of information, and you can clear all of that out. That is very time consuming because it's more than just the browsing history. You go through and you clear out everything. or you can use something that you're not routinely using, which is what I did. I went to my tablet and I'm never using this tablet, and I also don't use it. I don't save anything on it, and the entity is not able to obstruct my ability to create it. So that's how, and that's what I also document. Under no circumstances do you have to create, you don't have to enter in a phone number to create a Google Drive. And that's what I also know based on the using Google for so long. I'm not saying that such a means of verification does not exist. I'm letting you know that that is a superficial means of precluding the ability to create the Google Drive, especially in the specific environment while the entity is engaging in the elements of monitoring. Their demonic activity and creates real-time affect of your operation of your communication device. And this is what the world is also going to learn. This demonic activity, the demon-possessed population, this engineered environment, all of the above that you're ignorant of, they are monitoring on communication devices, products that you're using, and the effect of your internet use and your communication device, and you're ignorant to it. Thinking perhaps you've got errors, thinking perhaps you're getting, for example, a random call by a marketer, somebody stating the wrong name, and you're thinking that they have the wrong number, and actually it's not. They know exactly who you are. It's a means of engaging in the elements of monitoring you, and it's occurring in a specific environment. It's nothing other than audible activity and operation of your communication device, and it's someone that is group stalking, not a random mistaken ID. Or excuse me, a phone call. That's just an example. So anyway, this is what I documented. The entity is indeed sounding sirens. They still engage in this pattern of conduct while I use my tablet, but it is not obstructing my ability to upload, or excuse me, to create my Google Drive. And that is because I'm using a device that is not ever used. I'm not talking on my tablet. I'm not doing anything on my tablet. I use my cell phone, and I document heavily, and the entity is heavily engaged in federal stalking on this device as well. And so based on my experience in documenting this entity, that is why I'm able to avoid. But they have engaged in interfering with the use of that tablet before. While they create ongoing audible activity, again, as I switch devices, the entity is and has engaged in continuously repeating the audible activity creation. Remember, the elements of monitoring are used to control your or obstruct your ability to use your device. And they've done that before as well. So I'll use my phone, and they'll engage in the elements of monitoring, creating audible activity, fly over my apartment in helicopter, creating an obstruction to create a Google Drive. As I switch devices to do it on my tablet, the entity will fly over again by helicopter, and that will result in the preclusion of my ability to create a Google Drive. So they just replicate it over and over again. They did not fly over again by helicopter. They did not repeat sounding the sirens as I switch communication devices this time. Okay. But they're still monitoring. That doesn't mean that they cease monitoring. But I'm just speaking to the ability to maneuver around their criminal conduct, which I have been for years. I've been maneuvering. I wouldn't be able to capture the P.O.C. if I was not capable of figuring out what the entity is doing, their pattern, and also then maneuvering around that criminal conduct and still capturing my documentation and still publishing it. It is 6:01 a.m. This is documentation of what is not only criminal monitoring, but also federal stalking, where the same criminal elements of monitoring, demonic activity, is also creating a real-time effect on your use of your communication device and on your use of internet, which the people of the state are jointly engaged in. While that siren is sounding, it's audible activity, the people of the state are group stalking and monitoring and engaged in federal stalking. While the entity is flying over my apartment, amplified helicopter activity, relevant positioning by the entity using helicopter, the people of the state are group stalking in the path, engaged in group stalking in concert as well. Okay. The people of the state are at all times in every way engaged in criminal conduct in concert with that entity using helicopter and sirens at this early hour, engaging in a sex offense while I'm inside of my private space subject to that criminal monitoring system. Okay. It is 6:02 a.m. on May 20th, 2024. This is P.O.C.